Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of January the 17th and 18th, 2026. There is quite a lot going on over the course of a weekend. We have got a new moon, we've got Venus moving into Aquarius, and also we have a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. And it is this Mercury-Mars conjunction that I want to focus on, at the end of this video. But before I look at the Mercury-Mars conjunction in detail, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend in general. So here is the chart of the weekend set for midnight on January the 18th, Sunday, January the 18th, New York time. So here is the chart, and don't forget, by the way, to like and subscribe if appropriate. So we can see a lot of planets in Capricorn over the course of the weekend. So at midnight, halfway through the weekend, we have got the moon in Capricorn. So really, moon in Capricorn pretty much throughout the weekend, and the moon makes a few aspects. The moon makes a conjunction to Mercury, and it makes a conjunction to Mars, and Mercury and Mars are themselves making a conjunction. Now I'm going to be talking about this Mercury-Mars conjunction in sort of more detail later in the video, but as you can imagine, it's quite a verbal aspect. Mercury is the planet of communication. It's got a lot to say for itself, and so the words, could at times sound rather aggressive. Why would that be the case? Well, Mercury is the way we get out that energy. We have that raw, perhaps angry energy, and we have to say something. And, some of us might be quite argumentative. Mercury conjunct Mars can also say something about the way our mind is working. Some of us might find that our mind is going into overdrive. So many things to think about, so many things to get agitated about. And once we start getting agitated, well, it may be difficult to stop, and we might find ourselves, going round and round in circles. I mean, that's at least looking at Mercury conjunct Mars in a negative way. If there's something that needs to be said, then perhaps now is the time to just say it. Okay, maybe not now this minute. Maybe we should wait for the new moon, because we do have a new moon over the weekend. I talked about that new moon in detail in my last video, but this new moon really happens at the end of the weekend, and so part of the feeling about this weekend is that we can feel that it is a new beginning, or at least that we're very close to a new beginning because the sun and the moon are in the same sign. But there's at the same time things to finish off, and this is a reflection of what this new moon is about. This new moon is at 28 degrees 44 Capricorn. It's right at the end of the sign, and so, as I said in my last video, this new moon is kind of like a full moon. And some of us might feel that this new moon, is about just wrapping things up. Perhaps looking backwards rather than forwards. And so that might mean that, the weekend is maybe quite important. The weekend is an end of something, not a beginning. And when we move into Monday, well, Monday is the start of something very new, and of course we're starting to move towards the Aquarius season, and Venus moves into Aquarius over the course of a weekend. So that is important because it is the first planet to enter Aquarius. Okay, we've got Pluto in Aquarius, but we start the weekend with 5 planets in Aquarius. We've got Moon, Mercury, Mars, Sun, Venus. Huge concentration in Capricorn, but then Venus flips over and that is a change. Now, you could say that Venus is just moving from one Saturn-ruled sign to another. Saturn rules Aquarius as well as Capricorn. And so there's still a Saturnine feel to it, but Venus in Aquarius perhaps gives us the positive side of Saturn. The negative side of Saturn is perhaps like trying to hold things together. The positive side of Saturn is going further than that, wanting to be in control. And that's why, as far as I'm concerned, there is a strong association between Aquarius and totalitarianism. But I'll be talking about that in a couple of days' time. I do want to review Aquarius and the fact we've got Pluto in Aquarius and we've got loads of planets moving into Aquarius. So I'm not saying Venus moving into Aquarius is totalitarian or anything like that. I'm just saying that there is a slight change, and it's just ever so slightly more controlling. And of course Venus, when it moves into Aquarius, does start making a conjunction to Pluto. And Venus conjunct Pluto can be about control. People wanting to control other people, wanting to control the way things look. Venus is a planet of beauty. It's a planet of aesthetics. And Venus in Aquarius, a lot of people having a clear idea about what looks good and what doesn't look good. And Venus conjunct Venus in Aquarius can very much be the modern, whatever the modern might be. So yeah, as you can see, it is quite a busy weekend. But I don't think we should necessarily be thinking about the future, dropping the past. Let's move on, Brave New World, and all that kind of stuff. No, I think that there are things that need to be tidied up before we take that step into the unknown. So that is a picture. If we set the weekend, the middle of a weekend, midnight on Sunday the 18th. If we set it for New York, if we set it for Sydney, Australia, it's a fairly similar picture. Right at the middle of a weekend, we've got the moon at sort of 12 degrees Capricorn. And with 12 degrees Capricorn, I think that it just reminds us that if you are in Australia or New Zealand, the moon is going to be in Capricorn pretty much all of a weekend. Okay, right at the beginning of Saturday, it's possible that the moon would be in Sagittarius, but pretty quickly it changes sign. So I don't think that there is a massive difference between how one experiences things in Australia or New Zealand and what one's experience might be in, for example, California or Oregon or the west coast of the United States. And then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. So if we put the Earth at the center of the solar system, we do see certain similarities here. Heliocentrically, we have a Venus-Pluto conjunction, like we do geocentrically. We also have a Mercury-Mars conjunction, not quite as close heliocentrically as it is geocentrically, but it kind of reflects what we know already. There is a Mercury opposition Jupiter. There's Mercury. Remember that heliocentrically, Mercury moves very quickly, moves around the sun once every 88 days, although its speed around the sun does change every now and then. So Mercury's opposition Jupiter. So there is a lot to be said. There is a lot that people are saying, a lot that people are claiming with Mercury opposition Jupiter. Mercury is starting to move towards a conjunction of Mars, and we've got the Earth involved with it. Mars is still opposition the Earth. Earth is still it's widely conjunct Jupiter. So this kind of reinforces what I'm saying. I think that this weekend could be pretty active. So now it's time to look at things from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of January the 17th and 18th, 2026. Aries, an important weekend when there are a lot of planets in Capricorn. We've got a build up to a new moon in Capricorn, and additionally we have got a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. So I don't think that Aries, you're just going to want to just do nothing, say nothing, just fit into the scenery and mind your own business. No, I think you have something to contribute right now. Something perhaps that is important to contribute, and you are thinking perhaps quite fast and furiously, and you're thinking about all the things that are happening around you, and you don't want to just be passive, just watch the whole thing unfold. You do want to be in the center of things, and we know with Mercury conjunct Mars, you might find yourself being pretty agitated. And so, what is it that you're not happy about? And if there's something that you aren't happy about, then the sooner you say it, the better. Whatever it is that is on your mind. So feel free and don't hold back. But you don't have to be crazy about it, because this Mercury-Mars conjunction, it is in Capricorn, and so that means that Aries, you're going to find it relatively easy to get your way. You'll be able to clearly express your opinions. Your anger perhaps might be clear. Perhaps also your urgency. So people will listen to you. They will pay close attention to you. That's true. But you don't have to feel frustrated or impatient. You can wheel out your message, and if there's anything you want, you can certainly get it. But Aries, you need to remember that it all starts with you. It's important that you don't put yourself in a position where you are reliant on others, or you are expecting other people to take the initiative, and you might find that you're just sort of hanging around waiting for someone to do something. No, it is down to you. And Aries, if you are not happy with the way things are, and I think it's quite possible that you aren't happy, then you have motivation to do something about it. And that is one theme about today. It's making things better, creating improvements, and you don't have to wait for anyone to do that. So you start moving, you start making changes, you start thinking about your ambitions. There is, after all, a new moon this weekend, new moon in Capricorn, and with this new moon, it might feel that you've got to start something. Okay, it might be the weekend, but so what if it's a weekend? You can still kick things off. You can create plans, and I therefore think that you can really be very effective, and I think that you're going to be motivated to be effective, and so it's very important that you don't doubt yourself, and also that you don't get unnecessarily angry. I mean, Aries as a sign has a reputation for getting annoyed about things, and maybe for using very blunt language if things aren't going fast enough. But it all begins with you, and so you get going on something in a sort of a methodical way. Maybe you do it slowly, maybe fast, but the key thing is to be methodical about it, and that's what you do, and that's really going to move things along. By the way, Mars, your ruler, is doubly strong now. If you're into Vedic astrology, I have to be a bit careful here, sort of mixing systems, but in Vedic astrology, there is an approximate 24-degree difference between the signs. So Mars obviously goes into Capricorn when it goes into Capricorn, but there's a 24 degrees lag. So in the Vedic zodiac, Mars is going into Capricorn or around the time of this weekend, because Mars is what's now at 25 degrees Capricorn. So it's actually been in Capricorn for a couple of days, but it may be that now that Mars is in Capricorn, Mars is in its exaltation in both zodiacs, both in the Western and the Eastern zodiac, that can really give you, added strength, and so that looks good. So really, Aries, it is a time when you can excel and you can really be yourself, and there's no reason to make excuses or to feel you can't do anything, because right now you do have a lot of power. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, Venus is changing sign. I mean, that is something that's happening, over the course of a weekend, and this sign change may have an impact on you, because Venus is the planet of relationships. Venus rules Libra, which is your opposite sign. And so, when Venus changes signs, it may be that someone close to you has a change. I mean, quite a subtle change, because, Venus's sign change, well, it's not necessarily so dramatic, because it just moves from one Saturn-ruled sign to another. Saturn rules Aquarius, and Saturn also rules Capricorn. And so with a Venus sign change, someone might perhaps become a little more definite. Someone in the past, they might not have been immediately clear about who they are and what they wanted. Perhaps they were being overly cautious. And in general, Aquarius is a slightly less cautious sign than Capricorn. And, reason being is that, Aquarius is a sort of a positive, masculine air sign, and whereas Capricorn is, obviously a negative earth sign. But again, when I talk about positive and negative, I'm not saying that one is better than the other. Perhaps Capricorn is more reflective than Aquarius, and also Aquarius is quite an independent-minded sign, and so it might become clear that someone close to you has a particular view, and they are not going to compromise. Aquarius is a fixed sign, and so don't feel that you can take everyone with you, or that people are going to necessarily agree with you on everything, and do make some attempt to understand other people's individual viewpoint, because if you try to force things through, which you might, then there might be some resistance. So there might be times over the course of a weekend where you have to explain yourself, and it won't be so difficult. And just by showing a bit of respect to another person, a person who is becoming increasingly independent-minded, I think that would make it easier for everyone, including you. Taurus. This weekend we do have Venus making a sign change, and I think that this is an important event. I mean, here by the way is the chart of that sign change. The moment Venus moves into Aquarius, and this takes place on Saturday London time at sort of 12:43 p.m. So around lunchtime in London on Saturday, which would be sort of fairly early in the morning on Saturday if you're in the Americas, or in the evening if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But sometime over the course of Saturday, Venus will be moving into Aquarius, and for you, Taurus, that is really relevant. It says something about the way you express yourself. Now, Venus moving from Capricorn into Aquarius, in one sense, doesn't suggest a huge change, because both Capricorn and Aquarius are ruled by Saturn. So the Saturnine influence is certainly there. But Aquarius and Capricorn are different signs. I mean, for one thing, obviously Aquarius is an air sign, and Capricorn is an earth sign. So maybe with Venus moving into Aquarius, you're going to have more to say for yourself, and you might be thinking about things in new ways. And it might occur to you, Taurus, that you're in a way quite independent-minded, but at the same time you are open to new possibilities. I mean, Venus, as it moves into Aquarius, does make a sextile to Neptune, because of course Neptune is really right at the end of Pisces. That's the next big thing going on is going to be Neptune moving into Aries, or one of the next big things moving on is Neptune going into Aries. But with Venus making a sextile to Neptune, you can see that, or you can indeed feel that a lot of things are going on, a lot is happening on an emotional level, and you can pick up on it all. And then Venus moves into Aquarius. You're starting to think about what you can do. And Venus doesn't just move into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. And Venus is, if you like, the advanced party, because Venus moves into Aquarius, and then very soon a load of other planets will be moving into Aquarius. And from a Taurean perspective, Aquarius is an important sign. It's a sign, at least from a Taurus perspective, it really matters, because it's at the top of the chart. It's a sign in the Taurus horoscope that relates to your ambitions, where you're going to, how you're going to be progressing. And so perhaps recently, some of your ambitions might have felt as if they were on hold. You weren't fully able to express them, or maybe you were still working them out. While Venus was in Capricorn, you were perhaps thinking about one thing, trying something else, and being ready to just experiment a bit, but never committing yourself. But Venus moving into Aquarius, I think, does require commitment. And Venus conjunct Pluto, I mean, that's quite a definite aspect, and it's about you having a clear sense of what you want, and you are quite independent-minded about it. I mean, Taurus is an independent-minded sign anyway, but with Venus conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, the focus is definitely there, and it's not a time to be following anyone else's lead. It's not a time to just be a creature of wider trends. You have to be, or can be, an innovator. So as a Taurus, sometimes you can be a bit wary of things that are new. You don't understand them. You wonder whether it's just worth a risk, but perhaps it's now time to embrace the new, with open arms, and be ready to take a few risks. I mean, not the kind of risk that's going to destroy you, but if you've never seen something before, if you've never worked with something before, then that doesn't mean to say that you should disregard it. And And there might be a technological aspect to Venus moving into Aquarius. Perhaps you've been doing things in the same old way for a long time, and there may have been certain innovations that you've been ignoring, pieces of technology that you've refused to accept, but now might be the time to have another look. There might be, for example, some piece of machinery or a piece of software or some device that you have really decided that you weren't going to have anything to do with. It was just above you, but give it another go. Try it. See if it works. Maybe this time it will work. And Aquarius, you do have a chance to embrace the challenges of the future, and this is especially the case if you're working, if you're very career orientated. You might be in the forefront of things. Now, you might not regard yourself as being in the forefront, but Pluto is in Aquarius, and Venus is making this conjunction to Pluto, and so you can really make the most of it. So don't feel that you're being left behind. You're not being left behind, and in many respects, Taurus, you can really be in the center of change, and perhaps you can also be responsible for change. Taurians can be, great reformers, but they do it in a way that is very focused. It might be doctrinaire. It can certainly be doctrinaire. Taurians, once they know that something is right, they can just give it everything, and they can just keep ploughing on. It can be quite scary, and you don't want to be dictatorial about it. I mean, every Taurian has a dictatorial streak, and this Venus conjunct Pluto could make you feel that you absolutely know what you're doing, that you don't have to listen to other people. But I think that would be a mistake. I think that there is a place for being reasonable, but you don't want to be too reasonable. Gemini. We're finally getting some air. Air has been a problem for a long time, and it's all being very enclosed. It's being it's been rather claustrophobic. We haven't had any planets in air signs. Okay, the moon every now and then moves into an air sign, but then it just doesn't stay there for very long. And it has been going on for a long time. But now things are changing. We're about to get a real blast of Aquarius. Of course, Aquarius is an air sign like Gemini. And we have got Venus moving into Aquarius on Saturday. And Venus is just the first planet to move into Aquarius. After Venus, we've got a load of other planets moving into this sign. And so things are really starting to move. Ideas are starting to move. And we're just getting a real sense of flow. And so I think it is time to enjoy that activity, the fact that ideas are starting to develop, and we don't have to be tied to one course of action. We can think about it, and most importantly, other people can be more flexible. Perhaps there has been a certain lack of flexibility. Why has there been a lack of flexibility? Well, it could be that some people were afraid. I mean, fear is all around us. Many people, they just want to stick with what's in front of them. They don't want to consider the new. They don't want to even get noticed. What might happen if they get noticed? They might get into trouble. That's the kind of environment we're in. But now that Venus is moving into Aquarius, people do have ideas, and most importantly, you have ideas, and your ideas are starting to develop. I mean, they're always developing, but they're moving at a new level. And you don't have to be tied to any one particular way of looking at the world, and that's perhaps how this Venus moving into Aquarius, making a conjunction to Pluto, is starting to have an impact. You you want more, you expect more from other people, and I think that you're going to get more, and perhaps you can afford to be sort of more daring, perhaps talk about things which not so recently you had really been sort of keeping to yourself. And this reminds us that one of the big aspects of a weekend is a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. I mean, I will be talking about this Mercury-Mars conjunction in detail at the end of this video. But if you think about it, Mercury is you. Mercury is your ruler. It's conjunct Mars, so this really stirs you up. You're not prepared to do nothing, and your mind is starting to go into overdrive. So it's really good that Venus has moved into Aquarius, because at least it gives you some expression. And we've got other planets moving into Aquarius, over the next few days. So the Aquarian season is very much with us. So if you have an idea, or if you get angry about something, as you might get angry, I mean, everyone gets angry, even Geminis get angry. Geminis can try their hardest to be objective, but it's not a time to be too objective. You have things that really are important to you, that get you annoyed, but so far you might have been keeping to yourself, but you can't keep things to yourself forever. And so now might be a time when you can really start to express who you are, and also what you want to achieve. And one thing about Geminis is that Geminis, perhaps more than most other signs, are very aware of the passing of time. Geminis don't necessarily take kindly to getting older. Again, I know everyone doesn't like getting old. Okay, different people have different views. Some people welcome getting old. I mean, of course, I'm a Gemini, and there is this question about how does one deal with birthdays. My next birthday, I'm going to be 64, and how does one view it? Does one just see every single birthday as another nail in one's coffin? On the other hand, a birthday is just a reminder that you've survived. So if I get to my next birthday, well, I've got to 64. I mean, a lot of people don't get to 64, but time is pressing. Even though your birthday isn't for a few more months, not until May or June. If you are looking at this reading from the perspective of the sun signs, of course, if you're looking at the perspective at these readings from the perspective of your ascendant, then it's not the sun sign that matters. But if you're a sun in Gemini like me, yeah, you've got your birthday coming up in a few months' time, and even if you've got Gemini rising, I think that time is important. And there is a certain urgency. What can you achieve? And you're aware that perhaps what you haven't achieved, maybe in quite an obsessive way, but perhaps it's good that you feel that things haven't been done, that things need to be done. And so there's a great desire, I think, over the weekend, Gemini, to get things moving. Enough time has been wasted. Again, I'm not saying time has been wasted, but I think that you might think that time has been wasted. So let's get the show on the road, and in the process, we might have to be quite brutal. We might have to be very clear about what we want and how we want to do it, and we might be tough on other people, but we might, most importantly, be tough on ourselves. Looking at past failures, past hesitations, and just thinking, this isn't good enough. We absolutely have to move, and this feeds into the fact that Mercury is conjunct Mars. Mercury conjunct Mars is agitated, and it's very important, Gemini, that you don't just be agitated for the sake of it. That can happen with Geminis. Make sure that you have a focus. And going back to Venus moving into Aquarius, and the fact that a lot of new planets are going into Aquarius, a lot of a lot of Capricorn planets are about to change sign. That does mean that you need to start looking outwards. There's some danger that Geminis spend too much time looking inwards, looking at themselves too hard. And but just remind yourself, the Capricorn season is over. We've got planets moving into an air sign finally, so you have a chance to think, and you have a chance to plan and talk and to really express yourself in a way that is healthy and constructive, and is also interesting. And Geminis always need to be interested. There's nothing worse than a bored Gemini. Cancer. We have this weekend a new moon. And, being a Cancer, new moons matter. The lunation cycle matters. And this new moon, as I mentioned in my last video, because in my last video I also focused on this new moon, and so I don't really want to talk too much about the new moon, but for you Cancer, it is important. And as I think I said, this new moon is in your opposite sign. It's in Capricorn. It's right at the end of Capricorn, and this new moon is making a trine to Uranus. And so this might say something about other people, how you relate to other people, and you might find that there are some surprises. Something happens which you weren't expecting. Maybe someone does something you weren't expecting, and this might confound your pre-existing opinions. You might have had a view of someone, and they do something, and you think, well, that's interesting. You didn't know that person had that particular personality trait. So, don't be too close-minded about other people, and do be ready for some kind of surprise. And so that's one aspect of what's going on today. And a new moon might be about a point of departure in a particular relationship. You move from one phase in a relationship to another phase. And if, for example, you have known someone for a short period of time, particularly for a short period of time, this new moon, it might be about an ending. I think that this new moon, remember, is in very late degrees of Capricorn. Could be the ending of a short-term relationship, or on a more positive note, it could be that the relationship, changes gear, moves from one thing to another, and the reason that would happen is because of awareness. You see how things really are as you move from one phase to another. So don't make assumptions about your relationships with other people, whether it's a short-term relationship, whether it's been a relationship that's been going on for years and years. Don't make assumptions, and be open to new possibilities, and accept that other people are individuals. They're not just projections of yourself, because it is easy to project, isn't it? It's very difficult to see people as individuals. We all have our ideas about how people should behave. We dump scripts on them. We expect people to follow a script, and when they don't follow the script, we can get upset, but we're not being reasonable. We are not allowing people to be individuals, and so that may be an important theme of this new moon. Now, this new moon takes place at the same time as a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. So this Mercury-Mars aspect is pretty close to the new moon, and Mercury-Mars, it's quite an agitated aspect. It's in Capricorn, it's in your opposite sign, and you are aware of things that potentially could be agitating, and it may seem that a lot of other people are not necessarily too relaxed. Things aren't necessarily so smooth, and so why Why is there a lack of relaxation? Why aren't people just prepared to sort of let go? And, it's tempting to see it as their fault, their problem. But maybe if another person is finding it difficult to relax, maybe it's because you're finding it difficult to relax. What you feel is what another person feels. And it may not be a question of fault. It just may be about the times in which we're living. And this weekend is a time of change. I think it's a time of huge change. It's not just the fact we've got a new moon, it's the fact that we've got the beginnings of a changeover in terms of sign emphasis. We've got planets moving through late Capricorn, and they're all about to move into Aquarius. And for you, that certainly matters. Moon is about to move into Aquarius, and so that's going to have an effect on you for the next couple of weeks, having to look at things from an Aquarian angle. And that is different, and trying to balance Aquarius and Cancer, it can be hard, but it's an issue that, certainly the United States has to deal with that issue all the time, because the United States Declaration of Independence, July the 4th, 1776, United States has Moon in Cancer, Sun in Cancer and Moon in Aquarius. So the United States is a real Cancer Aquarius country, and I think that really is reflected in the United States. But of course, the United States is a Cancerian country with that Sun in Cancer, but it's still an Aquarian one as well. And so perhaps if you're an American Cancerian, you might really feel the difference between Aquarius. Aquarius, this very objective sign, and Moon, which is can be pure subjective. Cancer being pure subjectivity, looking at it from your perspective. So that is a change that's going on, and you should be very aware of your role in it all. So just because you see other people getting agitated, or they're not fully able to express themselves, it's not necessarily just their problem. It may be something that you are part of yourself. And so if you can accept responsibility for what is going on, I think that would make things a lot easier. Leo, there is quite a lot going on this weekend. I mean, it is a busy weekend. We've got a new moon, we've got Venus moving into Aquarius, we've got a Mercury-Mars conjunction, so it is all happening. And of course, it's the very end of the Capricorn season. So the Capricorn is reaching peak power this weekend. There is a stage, right at the beginning of the weekend, when we have five planets in Capricorn, and it doesn't get any better than that, or worse than that, depending on your perspective. And then straight away, those Capricorn planets, just as they hit peak strength, they move into Aquarius, and everything starts to change. And Venus moves into Aquarius over the weekend, and of course, Aquarius is your opposite sign. And so with Venus moving into Aquarius, that might well say something about other people. I mean, Venus in Aquarius could represent someone new arriving on the scene. So you look at what's happening around you, you look at what people are doing, and you might just see someone new turning up. And to begin with, you might not notice it. Something happening. You see it through the corner of your eye, but you're not fully aware. But it is there. Something has happened, and so do look around you. Look at all of the people around you over the weekend. Every single person you come across over the weekend. Even if it's just in passing, just consider what kind of impact might that person have. because even if they have zero impact or appear to have zero impact, doesn't mean it's always going to be like that. And it could well be the case, Leo, that someone is trying to attract your attention and perhaps they don't quite know how to. So, be open to that possibility. And at the same time, with Venus moving into Aquarius, remember, this is the beginning. Those planets, Sun, Mars, Mercury, and the Moon, they'll all be moving into Aquarius. So there's about to be a huge amount of emphasis on Aquarius on your opposite sign. And so it's kind of the beginning where you do need to be aware of absolutely everything going on around you. And at the same time, you need to consider what your responsibility is. Responsibility is actually an important theme at the moment for you. I think many Leos are feeling that they've got a lot on their shoulders, a lot to do, a lot to sort out, and you might feel that no one's helping you, but no one knows, no one cares. But that is not true. I think that is just your perception at the moment. And so, over the next week, you're perhaps going to see that it's not necessarily all down to you, that help is at hand. So there is a positive side to all these planets moving into Aquarius. It's perhaps about you realizing that you're not alone. Absolutely not. That people are available, and if you ask for something, there's a good chance that you'll get it, provided you accept other people's individuality. That's really important. Even with just Venus moving into Aquarius, I've said that is about someone moving onto the scene, someone new moving onto the scene, slowly. But another way of looking at it, and it may be talking about certain people just having just an awareness of who they are, what they want, where their boundaries are, and also being able to assert their independence. And so I think, over the weekend and into next week, mutual respect is going to, really matter. Now, looking at your sun, Sun is obviously an important planet in the Leo chart. The Sun is your ruler. And the Sun, it's about to move into Aquarius. It's also making quite a lot of conjunctions. It's still making conjunctions. It's still conjunct Mercury. It's still conjunct Mars. It's still conjunct Venus, and the Sun is additionally it's on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. It's on the Venus-Mars midpoint. You can see this if you look at what's going on. You've got there's Mercury, there's Mars. Now, it might not seem that the Sun is on the Mercury-Mars midpoint, but you have to remember that Mercury is moving quickly, but so it's effectively on the Mercury-Mars midpoint, and it's getting more and more on the Mercury-Mars midpoint, and so the Sun is also on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint. You've had that for weeks, and that is about your ability to be charming, to be attractive, to be charismatic, and don't forget that, because there might be times over the weekend where you feel that people aren't interested, that people don't care, that people are in their own world, but they can notice you. They are noticing you, and maybe people are noticing you, and you don't actually know that they're noticing you, because you are definitely having an impact, and so do recognize this impact. And so if you are getting attention from other people, then make the most of it, and don't martyr yourself. Don't think that it's all down to you. And as I just said earlier, help is available. So if you feel, Leo, that it's all down to you, that all the responsibility is down to you, well, that might just be your perception. And if you actually ask for something, you ask for help, ask for assistance, then I think that it's quite likely that you'll get what you're looking for. And so you don't have to take the weight of the world on your shoulders. Virgo. The main aspect of the day, perhaps the main aspect of the day, or the weekend rather, is a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. And this Mercury-Mars conjunction, it's trine Uranus. I think it's quite a serious aspect, and if you think about it, it's quite invigorating. I mean, when Mercury hits Mars, Mercury wants to express itself and wants to be definite, wants to be vibrant, wants to really be itself. And if there's anything you've been holding back, then now might be your chance. Virgos do sometimes hold back. They want to keep things to themselves. They have their own way of looking at things, and they don't want to draw too much attention to themselves. And perhaps you think that there are more important things going on in the world from you and your concerns, but don't sideline yourself and don't underestimate your importance. And with this conjunction between Mercury and Mars, I think it's very likely that you have got something very important to say, important and also maybe interesting. You have a natural creativity to you, and sometimes Virgos can hide that creativity. They have a talent and they don't talk about it. They don't think that anyone cares, and so it never gets appreciated. So if you've got that kind of ability, something you're being shy about, don't be shy. People want to hear about it. People want to see what you can do, and they want to look at your particular approach, because your particular approach is is quite novel. It's quite it's really interesting, and you might sort of doubt yourself. I was reading. What have I been reading at the moment? I was reading a book about the nuclear program, and how nuclear power developed, and from the very beginning, from Mercury's and so forth. And I was reading about Ernest Rutherford. So he's this scientist from New Zealand. Did he split the atom or whatever? But I didn't really know anything about him. But he was a Virgo, and he came up with these incredibly original things, and through experiments, and I was his co-workers. He helped him sort of discover things like radon and so forth, and they were Virgos as well. A lot of Virgos were actually associated with the nuclear program, and the beginnings of a nuclear program, and those first experiments with radioactivity. And so the example of Ernest Rutherford really does suggest that Virgos can be incredibly original, and they can do amazing things like sort of split the atom. So do not doubt yourself, and if you can be creative, if you can show your creativity, then you do go ahead. It might be quite methodical, perhaps. You have to do things right, but you can do it, and I think that you can really take advantage of this Mercury-Mars conjunction. And when we think about Mars, Mars is not just about anger. It's about work, maybe sort of manual work. And so with Mercury conjunct Mars, there could be something you're doing of quite a physical nature, and you're able to do it with incredible precision. Now, that might be making something, it might be working with plants, or something you're doing manually, which is of really very high quality, and is just a fundamental expression of of who you are. So, do take advantage of that Mercury-Mars conjunction, and perhaps by using it in a sort of a very physical way, you're preventing that Mercury-Mars conjunction getting out of hand, because a Mercury-Mars conjunction can be quite uncontrollable. It can be about verbal annoyance, it can be about being argumentative, it can be about shouting, it could be about inner aggravation. So by giving that Mercury-Mars some focus, I think that you're really helping yourself, and you're allowing yourself to be doing something of high quality. Plus, Virgo, over the weekend, you have very high standards. You have high standards of other people, but I think fundamentally you have high standards of yourself. And if you're going to do something, you're going to want to do it really well. And you might feel that there is a certain hurry. You might be comparing yourself with other people, or you might be comparing yourself with some ideal, and you might think that you're short of the mark, and because you feel that you're short of the mark, you have to work extra hard. Now, I'm not saying you are short of the mark, I'm sure you're not, but you might still have that perception. Now, having that perception that things could be better is not necessarily such a bad thing, because it just does encourage you to move things on to the next level, and that's perhaps what you can do. And when we've got all these planets moving into Aquarius, which is starting to happen. We've got Venus moving into Aquarius, and over the next few days, week, other planets will be moving into Aquarius. That can be a time when you can take your creative genius and find a way of actually putting it into action. But I'll be talking more about that perhaps in my next video, or one of my videos over the course of the next week. Libra. Venus is of course your ruler, and Venus is changing signs, and I think it's great that Venus is changing signs. There's just been too much stuff in Capricorn. This Capricorn thing has just gone over the top. It's gone too far. It's perhaps no longer helpful, and having these planets moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius is something that I think you should very much welcome, because when you've got all these planets in Capricorn, it can mean that you were just too focused, perhaps also too limited. You're almost perhaps limiting yourself. Okay, you might have had good reason. You valued your own security, and you wanted to make sure that everything was in good order. And now with planets moving into Aquarius, moving into an air sign, you're feeling better about yourself. And Venus moving into Aquarius makes you become aware of the possibilities, and also aware of what you can do. And Venus, when it moves into Aquarius, it starts making a conjunction to Pluto, and so there's enough timidity. We've had enough of that, and you now need to start to think about possibilities. And just remember that you have what it takes, and maybe while you had all these planets in Capricorn, you were able to do some quite sort of foundational work. Perhaps this is what you have to do every year. Maybe it's around Christmas or around a new year. It might be a time when Librans have to sort of ground themselves, but you can't go on like this forever. And so now things are starting to move, and you're getting evidence that you're really able to do something special. And in the process, there's a growing sense of inspiration, and perhaps that's what's been missing over the last couple of weeks. You haven't been inspired. You haven't felt real excitement about anything. But now things are very much changing, And I think also you're starting to get a sense, of your own power, of what you can do. Venus is making the transition from the conjunction to the Sun and the conjunction to Pluto. So quite recently we had Venus conjunct the Sun in Capricorn, and there may have been times when a Venus was conjunct the Sun where you just felt completely overwhelmed. You're dealing with sort of huge forces and you just couldn't express yourself. But you have been able to create some distance recently. Venus has been moving away from the Sun, and now Venus has completely escaped the Sun because Venus is in a different sign from the Sun. And okay, it's true that Sun will soon enough move into Aquarius, but all the while the angular distance between the Sun and Venus is increasing. Though, right now we've got Venus halfway between the conjunction of the Sun and the conjunction of the Pluto, and I do think that is positive. It means that we've got Venus on the Sun-Pluto midpoint, and so with Venus on the Sun-Pluto midpoint, you really do have an opportunity to tune into your fundamental power. And if there is something you want to change, then that is certainly something you can do. So think about it. If there's something you really believe can happen or should happen, then Libra, I think that there's every chance that you can actually make it happen. Scorpio. Things are starting to move from one thing to another. We've had a lot of planets in Capricorn, but now they're moving into Aquarius. And Pluto is already in Aquarius. And this might be a time, Scorpio, where you're starting to think about who you fundamentally are. It's not just about trying things out. One thing, another thing. There might have been a bit of toing and froing, but now you're thinking maybe it's just time to just get back to basics. Ask yourself, what you're fundamentally about, and start preparing perhaps for future challenges. But at the moment you have to just make sure that you are fully grounded, and it's all starting this process, and perhaps the process starts with Venus moving into Aquarius, and soon enough all of those planets currently in Capricorn will move into Aquarius, so that this sign Aquarius is starting to make itself felt, and it's a sign which is fixed. It's a very fundamental sign for the average Scorpio. So maybe you need to be more streamlined. You don't want to scatter your energy so much. You just want to focus on one thing or two things, the things that matter, and things that don't matter immediately should probably be ignored. And Scorpios can be very focused. Once they decide that something is important, they give it everything they've got, and so that might be part of the process. But as this process starts, there is a conjunction between Mercury and Mars, and Mercury and Mars is the main aspect of a weekend, arguably. And of course, Mercury-Mars is important for you because Mars rules Scorpio, and so your mind is certainly very busy. There is a lot of things to think about. I mean, you could become quite sort of agitated if you think about things for too long, particularly if you don't have some way to express these thoughts. So ideally, with this Mercury conjunct Mars, you will find a way of expressing how you feel. Now, that might be through talking, it might be through writing, or it may be through a piece of work, something that you really enjoy doing, something where you've got complete focus. Scorpio is, after all, a very focused sign, and so make sure this weekend that you have got some kind of aim. If you kind of go through this weekend completely aimlessly, you have no purpose. There's nothing you're trying to achieve. It's just another weekend. Then it could be quite annoying. It could be really, really agitating, and you might also feel that there's a waste going on, a waste of time, maybe, that there is an opportunity slipping you by because you're not entirely satisfied with the way things are, and you just know that things could be better. And so if nothing is going on, if you're kind of stuck between one thing and another, you're waiting for Monday, that would be really irritating. So at the beginning of a weekend, really decide what you want to accomplish. It can't be just one thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything of huge importance, but it just does matter that you just got something to concentrate on. Because otherwise you're just going to get worried that time is being wasted. Scorpios have a sense of their own power, but they also have a sense of their own loss of power. Or if you're not in a super powerful position, then you might be asking yourself why. If you're allowing other people to crowd you out, then again, that's not going to make you happy. Why would you allow other people to crowd you out? Why would you do what other people say? It's because you haven't got a plan, because you haven't got an idea, you haven't got a focus. So just make sure that over the weekend you very much have that focus and that you can really concentrate on something that is important to you and really give it everything you've got. And that is perhaps a preparation, for next week, and the next few weeks, maybe even the next month, where it is a time to be increasingly thinking about you, thinking about yourself, your own needs, and not worrying too much about external pressure. Sagittarius, when I looked at your sign in my video for yesterday, when I was looking at the new moon specifically, I kind of suggested that maybe a huge amount wasn't necessarily happening, that it could be a time when, for example, you didn't have to worry too much about the new moon because the new moon wasn't really affecting you. And in terms of what's happening over the course of a weekend, I don't think that this weekend is going to necessarily be that spectacular. Yeah, sure, there's a new moon, but I just had a feeling that maybe this new moon wasn't particularly important for you. I mean, sure, we've got loads of planets in Capricorn. There've always got to be loads of planets somewhere. And as far as these Capricorn planets are concerned, they don't affect you directly. If I were to say anything about these Capricorn planets, I might say something about the financial side of things. I mean, we've got this sort of peak Capricorn, with, I think at one point over the weekend, in the early weekend, you got 5 planets in Capricorn, and all the personal planets, and that might mean that what you have, what you don't have, and the monetary side of things could be relevant. And of course you've got the new moon in Capricorn, and the new moon might be about you, thinking about the way your finances are developing and what has been happening financially, and perhaps how you're able to or could be able to bring things under control. So yeah, if you can spend some time over the weekend contemplating money and perhaps realizing that there are maybe certain aspects of your expenditure that might be unnecessary, well, that would be a constructive thing to do. I'm not saying it's anything you have to do. And so, that is, a way of looking at the weekend. It's a weekend where I'm not convinced that there's going to be, a huge amount of pressure. And if there is any activity, it may relate to other people, what other people are up to, what other people are concerned about. And so, for example, we've got a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. This Mercury-Mars conjunction is perhaps one of the main aspects of the weekend, and it's not so much about your behavior as another person's behavior. What are they doing? And it might be that there are people around you who are quite agitated. They want to get things going. They want to get things to move. And so I think that in any social interaction, the energy might be with the other person. Again, that doesn't mean to say that it's constructive energy. They're looking for something to happen. They may be looking to you to make it happen, but why? Why is it up to you to create the action? It's not up to you, and I'm not even convinced that you would be very good at creating huge effects. I think that you can perhaps leave that to other people, especially now. We've got the moon has just left Sagittarius, so there are no planets in fire signs unless you count Chiron. And so for many Sagittarians, this is a weekend where you don't have to do anything, where you can let other people have their fun, and you don't really even have to participate in what they're doing. And it might really be as simple as that. Now, there are things that you could do, and I think that in terms of what you could be doing, or maybe even should be doing, well, you should be thinking, if at all possible, about the material side of things. I talked about money just now, but there may be other things, perhaps relating to work or your career, or just the whole way you're trying to move forward. And it's not that you have to do anything. It's not about action. It just may be about thinking about things and having ideas and starting to bring these ideas together. And if you can do that, I think that that would certainly be useful, and you could maybe give other people feedback. That's one possibility. But because there's not much going on astrologically impacting you, that might mean this weekend you actually have quite a lot of freedom. So perhaps you should just enjoy that freedom and do what you like within reason. You're not anticipating huge effects. I think that if you want to talk to people, that's fine. In fact, quite a good weekend for conversation. And there may be moments of seriousness where you can have a couple of minutes of intense conversation. Things are really clear, and then a couple of minutes, that's all it takes, and then you move on to something else. And that may be just the best way of using this weekend. Capricorn. It's still all happening, isn't it? I mean, with all these planets in Capricorn. Venus is leaving Capricorn, and so it's not quite as intense as it used to be. I mean, the beginning of a weekend starts with 5 personal planets in Capricorn. By the end of a weekend, it's only 4 because of Venus moving out. But like yesterday, you do have a lot of power. So when I say yesterday, like Friday, you do have a lot of power. You absolutely know how to present yourself, and people are going to notice you. And so if you want to be noticed, then don't be afraid. If you've got something to say, something to contribute, then go ahead. And one of the big aspects of the weekend is a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. This Mercury-Mars conjunction is in Capricorn, and if we're talking about Mercury-Mars, we're talking about the mind, and we're talking about energy. So you can energetically think about things. And then what? Well, okay, you can energetically think about things and work them out in your own way. You can perhaps plan in a very focused way, but you're also quite energetic about it. Yes, and it might also then be the case that you're able to communicate your excitement or even your urgency. So Capricorn, if there's something you feel you need to say, then now might be the time to get it out into the open. I think that people will listen, and people will pick up on your urgency. So don't feel that you need to sort of keep things to yourself. I don't think you do, and also, don't underestimate your ability to create surprises. You can say things which really get people's attention. Get people's attention in a big way. People really start to listen to you, and they know that you're saying something important. And if you want, you can slightly sort of change your words to give yourself added excitement, or at least to make your words sound extra urgent. And so using words as a way of getting people's attention really shouldn't be a problem. And if you feel you want to create agitation, if you want to create trouble, then the Capricorn, I think that's certainly something that you are going to be able to do. So if, for example, you feel that people are complacent and are not doing anything and they're not pulling their weight, well, everything can change. And through the power of your personality, you can make people do things maybe your way. And if you want to frighten people, then I also think that's something you can do. You suggest, well, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. And because you're a Capricorn, people will take you seriously. So, it is very much a weekend where you are in control. At least it's a weekend where you certainly can be in control. Though, don't forget that Venus is moving into Aquarius. So Venus moving into Aquarius, that does suggest something else. And so Venus in Aquarius might mean that you have an opportunity to think about the cost of things. I mean, Capricorn is a sign that is aware of cost. Money is not alien to you. But maybe with all of these planets in Capricorn, there may be moments over the last couple of days where you haven't fully been aware of the financial implications of something. Then Venus moves into Aquarius and suddenly you are. And it does make sense. And you perhaps might be aware of something, yourself. You aware that if something were to happen, then it's going to mean something financially, in a good or a bad sense. And perhaps this is something that you need to communicate. Venus does make a conjunction to Pluto quite soon. And so with this Venus conjunct Pluto coming up, suddenly money may become an issue. And it may be becoming an issue by the end of a weekend. Just something, you're thinking about the cost and you can't help thinking about the cost. And maybe this is something that you need to talk about. And maybe there have been some plans. Some plans were made, and certain people didn't necessarily think these plans through, and the cost of these plans might be just too much. So if you are in the process of planning, whether it's in your family or in something to do with your home or maybe at work, don't feel that it has to happen in exactly the way it has been planned. And if you're thinking about, for example, cancelling a project because it's too expensive or putting an idea on ice, maybe that's something that needs to be done. I'm not saying it will work out like that, but have another look at the calculations. And if you do have another look at the calculations, you might realize that something is wrong and that something needs to be changed. And I don't say this as anything bad or as anything negative. It's all about you being proactive and you just starting to become aware about where things are going. So I think that you can do a lot of things which are useful over the weekend, and you might be able to also save yourself and others quite a lot of money. Aquarius. It's starting to happen now. The planets are moving into Aquarius. Aquarius season is certainly starting, and the first planet that moves into Aquarius is Venus. So over the weekend, with Venus in Aquarius, that does change things. And Venus is, of course, a planet that is related to relationships and how you get on with people. And so I think that with Venus moving into Aquarius, you are perhaps slowly becoming more sociable. And in the recent past, it might have been difficult to really get on with people. Something was missing. Maybe you just weren't in the mood. But with Venus moving into Aquarius, you are finding it easier to talk, easier to relate, and perhaps easier also to get people's attention. And I think that you're coming over as a sort of a nicer person. Sometimes Aquarius, you can perhaps come over as being a bit sort of aloof and detached. And you shouldn't forget that Pluto is in Aquarius. And so with Venus moving towards a conjunction of Pluto, that doesn't say something just about you being pleasant, but it also says something about your power. And you can come over as being a powerful person, not necessarily a threatening person, but certainly you have power. And you're the kind of person that people want to get on with, that people want to talk to, because it does appear that you've definitely got something to contribute. And if you want to use this power, then Aquarius, I think you can. So if you want to be noticed, if you want people to listen to you, even if you want people to do what they're told, then I think it can start to happen. But it might be a fairly slow process. Venus has gone into Aquarius, but it's suddenly quite new. It's suddenly realizing that there are planets in your sign. And then next week, we've got a load more planets going into your sign. I mean, the Sun is about to go into Aquarius. Mars is going to Aquarius. It's all happening now. And of course, the Moon will move into Aquarius. And we do have a new Moon over the weekend. And the nature of this new Moon is going to change. This new Moon is in Capricorn, which is obviously Capricorn is the sign before Aquarius. So to begin with, this new moon might be quite understated. Something has changed, but you're not really thinking about it. And then the Sun and the Moon both go into Aquarius, and then suddenly what started as a Capricorn new moon becomes an Aquarian new moon. And it really becomes clear, Aquarius, that something important has started, and you become very inspired and someone who people want to know, people want to talk to. And as the weekend unfolds, I think that you're going to have more and more things to say, more and more things to communicate. In the past, you might have wanted to keep these things to yourself, but things have changed, and perhaps you feel now that the time is right to reveal the true Aquarian. All those things that you've been thinking about, worrying about. Perhaps you've been doing some planning, but you can't keep it to yourself forever. And perhaps the moment for revelation, for showing everyone who you are and what you've got to offer, has finally arrived. So Aquarius, that does look positive. And in a way, this weekend with the Venus moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius is kind of the changeover. It's when you change from one thing into another. You change from perhaps being quite passive and being maybe ever so slightly withdrawn to being really right in the center of things, being in a position where you can no longer be ignored. Pisces. It's a weekend where there may be a fair few people to deal with. I don't think that you're going to be alone this weekend. Okay, you might want to be alone if you've always got a choice, but you should, as far as possible, try to take an interest in what's going on around you, the people around you, what they're saying, what they're doing, and so that looks to me to be quite positive. And you don't have to take anything too seriously, though. I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to be a weekend that is like super important. It's not really like that, and I don't think that there's going to be a huge amount of responsibility. It's rather just seeing what is available, perhaps turning up to things. You don't have to be in the center of things. You can be on the periphery, but you're there. You're noticing what's going on. There might be a few surprises. It is a busy weekend. I think it's a busy weekend for everyone, and you might come across people and situations which are ever so slightly unexpected. And as far as people close to you are concerned, do try to think about their priorities. Ask yourself what is important to them, and certain people might be undergoing a change. 2026 has kind of arrived, and maybe that's what this weekend is about to an extent. I know that the new year was on January the 1st, obviously, and we've got the Chinese New Year. It's quite a late Chinese New Year. I think Chinese New Year is sort of mid to late February. It's in that February new moon. So it's there's another month before the Chinese New Year. So when does 2026 really begin? But you could say, Pisces, that 2026 really begins this weekend. I don't know why, but I think that just feels right. This is the first new moon of the year, and so this is the real beginning, and you have to respect that, not necessarily because of yourself. I mean, you're on your own timing. You understand how time works, but as far as certain people are concerned, it's a new beginning for them. So over the last few weeks, there may have been a general lack of commitment. People didn't really know what they were doing, but now it has changed. People are much more sure of themselves, and they're sure of what they need to do, and there might be a certain urgency there. And if you pick up a feeling of urgency, you need to respect it. You might not feel that anything is urgent, but if you don't respect other people's sense of urgency, then there could be problems. You don't want to be the one holding everyone back. I mean, you could, because you might lack that urgency. But if you kind of try to understand what other people are thinking about, what other people are worrying about, then I think you perhaps have a chance to participate in that worry. Now, why would I want you to participate in that worry? It could be, Pisces, that there are certain things that you should be concerned about. Perhaps you're not moving fast enough. There are things you need to work on, and when you realize that other people are in a hurry, that other people feel a sense of urgency, then you might pick up on that urgency. And there's nothing wrong at the moment with having a sense of urgency, because, as I just said, this is the beginning of the year, arguably. This is the new moon where it all kicks off. And so perhaps, Pisces, the big challenge here is to work out exactly what your role is, and where you fit in, and what needs to be done now, because there are always things that need to be done now. Okay, the sun doesn't move into Pisces for some time. The Pisces season, starts sort of in a month's time, but that doesn't mean to say you do nothing. I mean, I think that you need to have perhaps a greater sense of responsibility, and you shouldn't forget that Saturn is still in Pisces, just in less than a month, February the 14th, Valentine's Day. Saturn will move out of Aries, and so now with Saturn moving through Pisces and right at the end of Pisces, it is a time to get things together. And if you're not sure what to get together, then perhaps you need to look at other people, look at their example. And if you look at their example, then that might give you the impetus that you need. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it is time to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 38, which is opposition, which is actually the same hexagram as we got when I was doing the I Ching for yesterday, when I was looking at the new moon and how it would affect us. So this concept of opposition, of estrangement, seems to be quite important with this new moon. And this reflects perhaps some of my thoughts about this new moon. I was saying that this new moon, because it's very late in the sign, it's 28 degrees 44 Capricorn, has a feeling of a full moon. And so opposition, estrangement, means that we just do feel a sense of alienation. As I was saying yesterday, we feel separated out from it all. And how are we going to reconnect? And this might mean that there are a lot of sort of feelings of negativity here. And how are we going to actually work out how to fit in with the world around us? And it might seem that everything is against us. So there could really be quite a lot of negativity here. And so how do we deal with this? Well, fortunately, there is a moving line, and the third line moves. Third line from the bottom moves. Now, normally, the third line in the I Ching is not particularly fortunate, but this line, third line from the bottom, is not actually so bad. And what it is about, really, things start off very badly. It talks about all these sort of dreadful things that could be happening, perhaps in Chinese feudal society, having your head shaved, having your nose cut off, and it's all really humiliating, obviously. That cutting noses off seems to be a thing in China. I mean in ancient China, it's kind of quite disturbing. And so that's how it starts. But things get better. I mean, what can be worse than having your nose cut off? But things do get better. And you start to be able to integrate and to understand, what is happening. And in the end, you find support, because one of the concepts of this hexagram, opposition, is about having no support, feeling that one is on one's own. But in the end, one gets support. And so it might be the case that someone that you thought was of absolutely no use is able to show themselves to be useful and loyal and trustworthy. And so this idea that you're alone, at least that's how the weekend might start, that you are unsupported, does transition. It changes, and you start to realize that help is at hand. So when the third line moves, that means that we are able to move to a different hexagram. So the deadlock breaks, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 14, which is possession in great measure. So that is a really good hexagram. So the weekend kind of starts with this really quite difficult hexagram, opposition, and it ends with 14, possession in great measure. Really feeling good about yourself and what you have, and realizing that there was no problem. You might have felt that you were unsupported, you had nothing, you were completely at odds with the rest of the world, but then things change and you realize that you've got what you need. Now, when I say got what you need, okay, that might be about money, but it might also be about friends, support, having the right knowledge and experience. So overall, it's a good weekend. It doesn't start well, but it certainly ends well. And now I want to finish by looking at the astrology of the weekend. I particularly wanted to look at the Mercury-Mars conjunction. So in my last video, I considered the new moon taking place over the weekend. And, we cannot ignore the fact that there is a new moon. And the new moon sort of adds poignancy to everything else going on over the weekend. And so looking at the Mercury-Mars conjunction, it's here. So here is the time when that Mercury-Mars conjunction becomes exact. So I make it that Mercury-Mars conjunction is on Sunday at 7:40 a.m. And so there's our Mercury-Mars conjunction at 26 degrees 3 minutes Capricorn. And it is trine Uranus, because Uranus is at 26 degrees Taurus, and that's one of the aspects we've got over the weekend. I haven't specifically mentioned it so far, but the weekend does see a trine between the Sun and Uranus, and of course the new moon is trine the Sun and Uranus. So with Mercury conjunct Mars, we have got quite a lot to say. There's a lot to talk about, and if we do really feel that something has to be said, then we should really communicate it, and people have to hear it. But as you can imagine, Mercury-Mars conjunctions can be too much of a good thing, because Mars can escalate things. Mars can get angry, and with a Mercury-Mars conjunction trine Uranus, when we think about that trine, it's perhaps just a bit too easy. It's easy for us to get angry and to do things, on the spur of a moment, but it's all the more so for people in power. What are people doing over the weekend? There's always stuff going on. In terms of geopolitics, and so there are going to be sort of strong words, left, right, and centre, and this Mercury-Mars conjunction is between the Sun and the Moon. So if you look at this for a precise moment, moment of the Mercury-Mars conjunction, you can see that the Moon is 4 minutes away from the Mercury-Mars conjunction. The Sun is just 2 degrees away, so it's happening between the Sun and the Moon. So we've got this Mercury-Mars conjunction taking place on conjunct the Sun-Moon midpoint. So when you've got planets on the Sun-Moon midpoint, that makes them extra strong. Charles Harvey, I think the astrologer Charles Harvey, in his book Working with Astrology, he talks about the Sun and the Moon as being the cosmic marriage. And when you're looking at a horoscope, you always see what is on the Sun-Moon midpoint, what is conjunct the Sun-Moon midpoint, what is opposition, what is square, semi-square, sesquiquadrate. See what's there, and those planets could just become extra prominent because they're on the Sun-Moon midpoint, and of course they're tied up with a new moon. So I think that this Mercury-Mars conjunction could very well be a defining feature, of the weekend, and we could just see Mercury-Mars as just being about words, and people having strong words, politicians having things to say, and it could be about action, because if you start to say a lot, if you start to think a lot, and you're in a position of power, then it doesn't take long before you actually do something. So I think that it's unlikely to be just a sort of a quiet weekend, both on a both on a personal and a collective level. And because this conjunction is taking place at the time of a new moon, well, it just makes it extra strong. When we look at a new moon, let's just quickly look at that the new moon chart as well. So here is here's the new moon taking place over the weekend. We've got Mercury. There's a Mercury-Mars conjunction. It's a bit further on, but we've also got the moon triggering it as well. So, the new moon is a point of power. So the force of this Mercury-Mars conjunction is not just about the weekend. It says something about the next couple of weeks. The next couple of weeks are going to be a time when people around the world are going to be angry. They're going to be agitated. They're going to be rebellious, and they're going to be very vocal. We're seeing demonstrations, all over the place for different reasons. Whether it's in Iran or Minneapolis or in London or Paris, people are just not happy. And I don't think that this Mercury-Mars conjunction is going to help. It's just going to be an agitating factor. And the fact that this Mercury-Mars conjunction is trine Uranus as well just does make the whole thing look rather explosive. So, it does look like that we're, living in interesting times. And I think that the next couple of weeks we're going to see, evidence that this Mercury-Mars conjunction is a major descriptive feature. And so, enjoy the Mercury-Mars conjunction. Perhaps use it yourself. If you've got something to say, then consider the implications. It depends where you are. It depends what kind of culture and society you're in. I mean, saying things can be dangerous. Even in the Western world. In Britain, Mercury-Mars can be about getting annoyed about something. Maybe you tweet something or put something up on social media, and before you know it, you're arrested. So there can always be a consequence. Of course, in somewhere like Iran, the consequences of expressing yourself can be more dramatic. It can potentially lead to the end of your life. So it kind of depends where you are. But we shouldn't think that somewhere like Iran has got a monopoly on totalitarianism. That is absolutely not the case. And we should not forget as well that now planets are moving into Aquarius. As I say, Aquarius is about the struggle between freedom and control. And because there is a real totalitarian feel to the sign Aquarius. And we're going to really get that over the next couple of weeks as Aquarius season starts. But I'll try and talk about that sooner rather than later. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.